Friends, welcome. In just a couple of days, based on when I'm recording this, Chapter 7 and Chapter 8 in sort of Convallaria are coming out to global. And why that's important is because in Chapter 8-5, you unlock another system called Engraving. So at its core, Engraving are additional materials that you add to your legendary weapons and trinkets that add different attribute stats, but then can also be combined to give a special power. Now I'll switch here, we'll take a look at Twitter. And this is what the team posted just a few days ago, kind of speaking towards this system. Now, a quick disclosure, I do not play on the other servers, nor do I have the test environment, so I've not experienced this myself yet. So the information I'm sharing is the same information that you could pull up in Twitter as well. But I want to give you my opinion on these different new powers, essentially, that you can combine onto your characters. So there's 4 different engraving materials, and you get these by playing the Crossing Worlds Radiant Forging mission. I'm assuming the higher levels. I actually haven't seen these yet personally. I probably haven't unlocked it just yet. This is more of an endgame system. And as you can see here on this top piece, you add one of these to your weapon or to your trinket, your legendary, and it can give 1 to 3 stats. But what's really kind of neat about this, and what I've been looking at for these last couple of days, is on this page here. So in this system, let's say you put we'll go back here. Let's say you put a wand material onto your weapon, and you do a pentacle onto your trinket, and you put those on your character. A wand and a pentacle will give you the power of decrease physical damage taken by 15%. Pretty cool. But who knows if that's optimal, right? And so this system requires just a little bit of forethought to say, what kind of character are these items going to be going onto typically? And what am I going to get out of the system the most? What's my benefit going to be here? And so let's talk about that. Let's look at these different powers, and I want to kind of share with you where I think certain ones will go good with certain characters or certain types of characters, more the archetype than anything, and where some I just don't think necessarily, at least I don't see a lot of benefit in other characters. And the reason I'm doing this before the system really comes out is that way you don't start accidentally throwing these materials away, just kind of willy-nilly onto any item just to throw an extra stat on there, to give you a little bit of kind of foresight and forethought into where you might want to target certain types of these materials. So let's go through each of these individually. And again, I haven't experienced this firsthand, but just kind of assessing what the powers themselves are, what I think will be good for your characters. So the first here is a sword combo, and it says when actively attacking unharmed enemies, increase crit by 20%. This one I struggle with. It sounds kind of good, but I think it might be a bit of a trap. When I think about who could use this is really your character who is going out and hitting the target first, while they're not, damaged, while they're still in that healthy state, which I believe is above 70% HP, and it gives them more crit. At first I was thinking, I'm like, this could go good, on a Seeker or someone like a Cold or Crimson Falcon. But the problem with that is typically everything else I've already done has gotten their crit large enough that most of my hits are critting anyways. And so now if I don't just flat out, annihilate my target on that first hit, I don't think this extra crit's going to be the make or break difference. And so my second hit into them has no benefit. So this is great on that first initial strike and nothing else. And so it's not that it's completely useless. I struggle when I look at some of the other ones on the list that we'll talk about here. I struggle to see where this one is ultra beneficial in most situations. So next we have Wand plus Wand. And with Wand plus Wand, after using basically any kind of attack, you've got attack, strike back skills, assisting attacks, whatever, you get 1 random level 2 attribute buff. My issue with this one, besides the fact that it's random, is that in the difficult content where I care about buffs to a large extent, I'm pre-buffing. I've already planned my team around granting buffs either in a kind of team-centric way, like something that maybe a Gloria would do, or an Edda would do, or I have another character, even from the free-to-play pool, that might give me specifically an attack to, kind of a bonus or of some sort. And so again, this one, unless there's nothing else on the list I could think of for a character, I just don't really see the Wand combo doing anything amazing for my strategy. And it's kind of the same thing with Pentacle and Pentacle. Really, these first 3 I'm not overly impressed with. So Pentacle, when injured, increased damage by 5% and decreased damage taken by 5%. So, again, when you get below that 70% threshold. When dying, increases damage by an additional 10%. So I'm going to read that hopefully as 15%. And damage taken by 15%. This is another one where I can't right off the top of my head think of a ton of characters that would use this. Maybe a Guzman. I haven't pulled him myself, but I understand him to sometimes function in lower health levels. Maybe there's a couple others like that. If that's the case and they can sustain in that dying range, then it's a 15% damage, 15% decrease in damage taken as well. That's pretty strong. I just don't know too many characters that want to live in this realm for that long. Typically, when someone's in that dying stage, I'm healing them. And so the main benefit and the dying state, I'm just not going to realize. And again, over other things, I don't know that it's as potent. Maybe there's some endgame scenarios where you've got a character that's riding that death line, and maybe we just don't have those characters yet, or maybe it is Guzman, who knows. But again, I just don't see a ton of use cases for Pentacle and Pentacle. It's not all doom and gloom though. I promise. A lot of these I like, and the next one's one of them. Cup plus Cup, increase healing effects by 10% and healing received by 10%. This is going straight to my Angel. And if I had, say an Anana on my team, I don't, I would see myself putting this on her as well. Basically your healer pool. It's a flat 10% additional healing. I think even my trinket on Angel right now gives, or maybe it's my tarot, it gives, I think 15% added healing. So anytime you can, really juice up the main reason you bring somebody, that's what you want to be looking for. And I can't think of anything else on this list where a healer would benefit more from, unless you're running some sort of a hybrid support. Maybe they do some damage, but like when I bring Angel, she's there to heal. And so this is going on Angel whenever I get around to finding these particular materials. Sword plus Wand. This might be my favorite one. There's a few in here that are pretty good for sure. But this one is interesting because I find myself traveling a lot in the game. And so the way this reads, before actively attacking, for each one tile traversed, increase attack and defense by 4% up to 12%. So to get your full 12% bonus, you need to travel 3 tiles. So think about, just when you're sitting in front of your target and maybe you want to get behind them for a back attack, that's, 1 to the left, 1 to the side, up and over. So, you're, 4 moves right there, right? And so I think it's a lot easier to traverse 3 tiles than it seems. Now, I would not say that's the same for range units. So this is to me more of probably a good melee type one to use. And I even have to think about it on some of these other ones down here. I'll show you in a second. But this could even potentially be decent on a tank because you're getting a flat 12% by traveling. The only issue with tanks is a lot of times you are positioning in stationary. Maybe you're doing a choke point. So it really depends on how you play your tanks in the maps, which is the only reason I don't just emphatically say put this on them as well. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, first off, my Cole, this would go on Cole. She is running around the map all the time, assassinating people constantly. And, I think about Rawia, right? Someone that we all have from our Voyage Memento. Not only does she walk a lot, but she also has that move that kind of brings her forward a couple blocks, things of that nature. And so there's a lot of characters that do stuff like that, but certainly just in positioning, going over and up a square to a side, or going fully around a character, or maybe there's a character that you're not strong against, and so you're positioning to another one that you have advantage over. I just honestly think you travel 3 tiles a lot more than you may realize. And so for that reason, I think this is a lot stronger than it seems for a lot more characters than it would seem that it is. All right, so next up we have Sword and Pentacle. When unharmed, increase attack and defense by 12%. So there's 2 things that come to mind here. First is your ranged characters. Ranged characters, I think, have the best chance of capitalizing on this most frequently. So unless they're getting nuked by, AoEs, or they're getting, assaulted by range damage, chances are they're behind a tank or behind at least a melee frontline. They may even have a healer kind of back more in their range. And so on a fight-to-fight basis, they're probably getting targeted less frequently or positioned in a place where they can't get attacked. And so for that, in a lot of situations, they may very well have the full unharmed or healthy benefit and that flat 12%. And because their range, they may not be moving as much as we were talking about with the sword and the wand. And so I think that this is a really good one for like your archers, your mages, things like that, that aren't moving as frequently and that are sitting in the back line. Now, if they do move, they don't lose this, so not a big deal if you have to reposition them. So I do think that this will be a strong one for range magic type characters. The other piece I think about is you might be tempted to slap this onto a melee character, you know, someone like a Cole or somebody, you know, who's just kind of sitting up front, things of that nature, and saying, oh, well, now I don't have to worry about traveling. But the thing I think about is they're taking the brunt of the hits. And if you have to be above 70%, you may not always have that healer walking up to heal every single one of your melees. And as we get to harder content, and right now I don't think the content's necessarily that difficult outside of maybe weapons trial and some tower, maybe a couple Fool's End bosses or Fool's Journey bosses. But I think that when we get to more endgame systems like Tower of Ascension in the other servers, I would expect there to be more damage and more need to heal, which means if there's more damage coming in, there's more opportunities for you not to be at that healthy range of health. So unless the content is forcing me to be stationary and I really can't move for Sword and Wand, on my melee, I would probably prefer personally Sword and Wand, and for my range, Sword and Pentacle. I think that's where I'm going to start with my setups. After that, we have one of my favorite mechanics that I don't really use that often, Sword and Cup. And this says when actively attacking, increase damage by 5% and grant 15% lifesteal. When I first read this, I originally thought tanks. And I'm going to come back to that in a second because I actually don't necessarily think this is good for tanks. But I do see some application of this on melee. This one's tricky because you get the flat damage increase of 5%, so not as much as say the 12% if you're, range, or 12% if you move the tiles, for the Sword and Wand. But you do get a little bit of a bonus, and it's always there. The lifesteal could be good at giving you just that little bit of life to keep you up, but I don't know by the read of this if it's just 15% of the damage you deal or something else. I would read it personally as 15% just flat lifesteal. Like if I hit you, for 1,000, I'm going to get 150 back. And so I think I need to test this on a couple characters and just see how much that really helps. I could see on somebody who does multi-hits or somebody who crits a lot or does multi-hits and crits like a Cole. I could see that being really strong if it's per hit, because I've definitely seen crits in the 4s, 5,000s. There's other people that are probably doing some really cool builds with things that are even higher than that. And so if you can make enough damage to where it's filling a good chunk of your health bar, that could be a really good one to slap on your DPS characters. But if you're coming in with a tank, and this is some of the math I was doing on the Loot and Waifu site, selfie site, it's got a great little calculator there. I jumped into the tower and I pulled down Mytha, and I pulled down one of the enemies that I fight that kind of charges into you. And I was just running the math on it. And I think the average was actually wrote down next to me. I think the average was a couple hundred hit points of health is what I would get for a standard attack or attack with, 120% multiplier. And as a tank, I don't think that's enough. So where I'd originally read this and said, oh, this would be great on a tank, get up there, get some lifesteal. If there's not multiple hits and each of those hits are giving you health back, I think that the flat damage reduction ones that you're going to see here in a second might be better. The only caveat to that is this is just lifesteal. So it's everything you do. You could hit any kind of enemy and get this lifesteal back. So again, I do want to kind of test it. I might have a couple pieces of gear that I just throw on and go into something easier and just kind of see what it does. But mainly I would say this one is probably a decent one for your kind of melee attackers that are taking a couple hits. Maybe they take some AoEs, things of that nature, and they could heal up on it while giving a slight damage bonus. But still, and I'll have to look character to character, but I think my money is still on Sword and Wand. I still think that if you travel a couple tiles, this one is going to be better because not only are you doing more damage once you travel a couple tiles, but also you're taking flat damage reduction. And if you're not taking the damage to begin with, that much damage, then you don't really need to heal it. Plus, if you're carrying a pocket healer, they're doing the healing job for you. So still kind of sitting Sword and Wand on this one, but there might be a couple cases where I see Sword and Cup as being a good melee option. Wand and Pentacle, Pentacle and Cup, we can cover these as a pair. The Wand and Pentacle decreases physical damage taken by 15%. Pentacle and Cup decreases magical damage by 15%. So you're going to pick your poison here. The big magical tank I think his name is Suppressor. Really cool looking guy in the game. I'll pull up a picture of him. I could see him having that one. A lot of the other tanks tend to be more physical dominant, so they could possibly work better with the reduced physical damage taken, or this could be a way to give a bit more of the antithesis to each other. So if you're on a predominantly physical tank, maybe you take the magical one. This is where, I kind of was thinking before about, well, do I give them the lifesteal and be more general? But just on a percentage basis, I think you just get more bang for your buck with a flat reduction. Now, I don't know that you want to necessarily flip-flop these a lot. So it's hard to say that you'll have the amount of gear to have, maybe always the Pentacle on one item and then you have something you swap between, the Wand and the Cup. I just don't know how practical that is. At least for my gear, I don't have enough to spread around like that, especially when I think about later needing 2 different 6-man teams for Tower of Ascension. So without that kind of option, you probably are going to be mostly stuck with picking one or the other. So just really kind of evaluate what you're going into content-wise, what you want that tank to do. But so far, I am leaning towards one of these two being the go-to for your tank, depending on tank type. Otherwise, like I said, on a tank, I would consider Sword and Cup, but just running the math on it, I haven't solved that myself to say that this is the greater pick for tanks. I need to get some content under my belt to really see that. Where that leaves us, the final one is Wand and Cup. At the end of the turn, 50% chance to gain Engraving Resonance, which is an effect. When using an active skill, next time, refund the energy consumed and reset the cooldown. So basically, you end your turn, you get a chance to get this buff or whatever you want to call it. And on your next turn, you cast a skill, instantly refunded on both the cooldown and the energy, so you could back-to-back it. This, I struggle a lot with chance to get type powers. This one being a 50% chance puts it in the camp for me of I can't rely on it. I do think there's characters that when this goes off, it's going to be powerful. Think about if you pulled or used a selector on like an Inanna and you want to use her ability that makes the character act again, and now you can do it twice in a row. Like things like that can be super strong. But if you're in a hard fight and that is something you're trying to plan around and it's 50-50 and it doesn't go off, it's going to feel bad. And so this might be my own personal preference coming to play here, but I really don't love the 50% chance things. It then has a cooldown of 4 turns. So if you think about a fight that lasts, your 15 rounds at most, some of them are like 11 to get rewards, you might be in a situation to really use this twice in a battle. I think that I would personally prefer something that is all the time. Again, like the healing if I'm on a healer, which healers is where I can see this being a bit more useful. Or if I'm like a damage unit who has like a big attack, I think I'd rather just have all my attacks be stronger all the time. Not to say that this is not a useful power. I'd be curious to see how reliable it really is. But again, without it being something strong of a percent chance, it makes it hard to strategize around. And I just don't love the luck-based type power. So again, that's personal preference. So yeah, so in a nutshell, that's the engraving system. And to sum it all up with a bow for you, I think the big winners in here are definitely the Cup for healers. I think the Sword and Wand is going to be possibly my big go-to, especially for melee characters. I would say the reduced physical damage, reduced magical damage for tanks would be a great one. And then the Sword and Pentacle probably for your ranged. Those are the ones that stand out the most for me, with a little asterisk for Sword and Cup. I want to test that one personally. So hopefully here in a few days, we all get the chance to play with this, get through 8.5, get some good materials. Hopefully I have a lot of legendaries to test with by that point in time. And we'll see how these things play out. But they should be a nice little power boost to our rosters, going forward. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. What are you looking at doing? Which of these stand out to you? Did I overlook something and you're like, hey, Bear, this one over here is super amazing and you are just terrible at reading it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed this, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. Helps us get out to more people. And with that, I will see you on the next video.